Good evening from Europe. Good afternoon, America. I'm Ciprian Moga. I'm Business Transformation Advisor, and I'm a volunteer member of the conference organization team, the conference Catalyzing the Future. It is a free event that will happen on September 30, gathering thinkers, practitioners in the field of organizations, and not only, terms like agility, anti-fragility, resilience, and so on. We have short presentation of the guests we will have in the panels, and it's my pleasure and honor to invite you to meet you with Geary Sikich, who is a trusted advisor and an expert in a field of resolution, business continuity planning, crisis management, disaster recovery planning, risk management, competitive intelligences. He wrote 5 books, all of them on the topic of crisis, emergency management. He even have an emergency management planning handbook, or another book, Protecting Your Business in a Pandemic. We are here today to explore the world we're living today, and in a very interesting topic about black swans. Welcome, Geary.
Welcome. Thank you. It's good to be here.
And I hope I didn't miss anything from your impressive CV. Anything else you want to add, please interrupt it and say, yes, you forgot this one.
No, you covered everything perfectly well. It kind of a nice to hear all that I've done all that.
I remember with pleasure our discussion a couple of days ago, and I said, okay, let's talk with crisis management guru about the world today. And talking and exchanging idea, it was very lively, a long discussion. We come with a subject that sounds like a movie name: how to recognize a black swan when you see one.
Yes.
Let's see where it goes this time.
Yeah, I think that it's quite interesting because the phenomena that people have had with the black swan ever since Nassim Taleb's book, The Black Swan, came out, it seemed to capture people's interest as well as their mental picture. And everybody suddenly wanted to go out and find black swans. Yet, if you look at his definition from his book, it says it's a highly improbable event. It is unpredictable, carries massive impact, and after the fact, we concoct an explanation that says, we saw this coming. That so make it seem less random, more predictable. The problem, and even Taleb points out in his book, is that it's a lack of knowledge when it comes to rare events with serious consequences. So many people have declared many events in the past and recently to be black swan events. And yet even Taleb will tell you that things like September 11th, the New York World Trade Center, was not a black swan. It was, yes, a very tragic event, but essentially it was something we should have been aware of the possibilities. So it was not like it was so improbable that it wouldn't happen. The same thing you see with events today. The coronavirus, which is on everybody's mind. There are many people that say, oh, this is a black swan. And again, Taleb comes back, and I just watched an interview. He says, it's not a black swan. Look, you had potential pandemic with bird flu. You had a pandemic with swine flu. You've got all these things we know and we should be prepared for. So this is not unreasonable to understand. The interesting things, though, that I find with the whole phenomena of black swan is that a black swan for you may be not the same for me, because I may experience it differently. So it could be, if you will, a white swan or a gray swan for me. if you take black as being the negative, you've had this tragic event. It may be great for me, if we're playing cards together, and I win the pot, then it's a white swan for me. But we have to understand that events aren't shared the same way, and that when we label a black swan, it's actually, we label it after the event. So it's not a predictive measure. It's a post-event label. And the problem with that is that when we label things after the fact, where are we looking? In the rearview mirror instead of forward. So when we look at black swans, and I kind of chuckle with this because I say to people, well, why go hunt for something that's highly improbable? Why not look for the things that you can identify and begin to start to take some action to protect yourself with? So I have to chuckle. The other day we were on a conference call, and I gave an example that I use many times, but I asked a simple question, and this is kind of a nice way to do this. So I'll ask the question: how many animals of what type did Moses take on the ark?
I did it already, so maybe we go directly to the answer.
Go ahead. Tell me what do you think the
I
answer?
already did it when I met you, so it won't be nice to answer.
That's true. So that's not a black swan anymore.
Exactly, it's very white.
But on the group that I was talking to, everyone came with the answer too. And then there was a couple of things of discussion. I said, well, then could you tell me why they call it Noah's Ark? And suddenly people said, oh no. And with them, I showed the slide of an ark with the numbers and then the question. It is that kind. That's why I say when you look for black swans, it's easy to deceive yourself. And in deceiving yourself, you end up being less resilient, less flexible, less aware of what's going on. So the concept and construct is nice, but it's not as how would I put it? It's not as active, if you will. Black swan is kind of an after the fact. So when we look at that, it really becomes an issue. I like Taleb's a couple of examples he has given, which I think are really pertinent when you look at risk and crisis management. So he talks about prediction and projection. And picture an ice cube. So you've got an ice cube. Can you predict what shape the ice cube will be when it melts? No, obviously not, because we don't know. And then the same goes for a puddle. If you've got a little puddle and you look at it, and can you tell what the shape of the ice cube was that formed it? So these are kind of the things that, as he said, when we look at our conventional practices, we really don't understand the prediction projection aspect. We need to begin to understand better how we look at things and what we're actually looking for. So when I mentioned to you, I think we were talking about this, that the Deepwater Horizon, the oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, which unfortunately blew up, sank, killed some 11 people, I believe. When you look at that, the media made it a huge event. And the reality is that after researching, since like the 50s, there have been over 200 oil rigs that have either had explosions and fires or sank. Just, a number of things that have been catastrophic that you really don't pay much attention to. So I'll give you the example is that in Venezuela, not a month or so after the Deepwater Horizon event started to unfold, in Venezuela, a gas rig called the Aban Pearl sank off the coast of Venezuela. And fortunately, all the crew on the rig were saved. The blowout preventer worked because it was not in the depth of water. But the fact was that it hardly made the news. So in Europe, the example I love to give is that the folks in Iceland who had a volcano, which
Yes, the
I
volcano
will
with
not.
wrong
I
name.
will not attempt to say that I just use the term E15. But think about the volcano and think about the eruption and the impact on air travel. And when you show the amount of CO2 emitted by the volcano, which was, I think, over 7,000 tons or something like that, it is a pretty good sized number. It's a nice pyramid figure. Uh, you see that and you think, oh my gosh. But then you look at the other side, and by grounding all of the airlines for the period of time, it reduced the CO2 emissions that the airlines would have emitted, because they would have emitted 300,000 tons. So was the volcano a black swan or a white swan? It was good for the environment because it reduced the CO2 emissions. Bad for the businesses because they couldn't fly. But you see these events in different contexts, and then you start realizing that they're not going to be shared together. They're going to be realized and felt differently. So for the air traveler, a very big inconvenience. For the environment, really kind of a nice situation. The same thing as when the coronavirus erupted and we started to have all the travel restrictions and the lockdowns in various countries around the world. What happened? China saw an immediate cleaning of the air, and their air quality went up tremendously. Same thing in other countries. Now, the U.S., on the converse, currently we've got the problem in the western part of the country with wildfires. Now, there is a really interesting perspective. Very unpredictable. They do potentially have the effect of a massive effect, depending on how they are. The current ones are having a massive effect because they've affected weather pretty much across the United States, and actually the smoke from the wildfires has actually made it over to Russia. So you see this, and you realize but it's not a black swan, because what happened last year? Wildfires. What happened the year before? Wildfires. It's just the magnitude that we're starting to see and the change that we have. So recognizing potential events and being able to capitalize on the ability to analyze and do what I call active analysis, which is constantly analyzing information as it comes in, you begin to get an idea that the rarity of a black swan is actually in the mind of the beholder, not necessarily in the reality of the world. So yeah, are there very rare events? I'm sure there are. We live in a world, 7 billion people? So rare events probably happen that we don't even know about because we're not there, and we don't know all the entire world population. Think about all that aspect, then you start to realize that the focus on risk management, crisis management, business continuity, all these things has to be forward looking, and you have to begin to realize that there are a number of things that are constantly, what I call constantly in motion. So identifying a risk changes the nature of the risk because you've identified it. So, and who else has identified it? Well, probably a bunch of people. So everything they do and we do that we don't communicate about changes the risk in a lot of ways. So what we do in terms of mitigation may be good, may be bad. May work, may not work, based on all the things that are happening with that particular risk that's been identified. So it's a challenging area. And I think that today we're extremely challenged by virtue of the fact that we're, how would I put it? We're dependent on technology, or we're isolated. And I say that in this way. If, as I wrote in an article called "Where's Our Next Shock Coming From?" If the internet was to go down, there's some catastrophic event, where would we be with our lack of information on what's going on in the world? Would we know about, as much about coronavirus? Would we be able to communicate? Would we be able to effectively be able to have a broader perspective on risk issues on information alone? I mean, there's a war going. Well, kind of. There's in what is it? Azerbaijan, and isn't there something going on in Europe? There's a little shooting war going on.
I'm looking for black swans in Europe, and it's very hard. Many things are predictable. Something that everybody expect to pop out. We don't know maybe the timing. I think this is not qualifying for a black swan, right?
Yeah, no, I think you hit on one of the key aspects of this area, is that many things qualify to be black swans, but it's the timing of the occurrence, because it really gets down to how much information is available or was available before the occurrence of the events that would have allowed you to do something to change the event from happening, or to mitigate the occurrence of the event in some way, shape, or form. Think of all the things that we could do if we looked back and said, "Wow, if I only did this or I only did that." I chuckle with people because I said at one point I looked at the stocks, and there was this one stock that I had looked at and thought, no. And it was a small liquid natural gas company, which went from 97 cents or 78 cents or whatever it was to $80. Now, a simple investment of a bit of money in that would have paid off really well. Well, the kicker with it was this. I told him, I said, well, if I'd have done this, I'd have made something like 30 million. And then if I'd 38 million. Then if I only took 30 million of that I made and put it into Amazon, when Amazon hit 2000, I could have been worth 4.4 billion. Why didn't I do that? Because I didn't look at it and see that there was potential. Amazon, okay, I buy books or I buy something off Amazon. People don't really think about these things. And let's face it, the natural or the liquid natural gas company, Amazon, they're risks. You could have lost all your money in that regard, instead of being in a situation where you could have been a billionaire. But the fact is, there are those people who can see some opportunities and seize them. A great example is Tesla, the auto manufacturer. Musk has done an absolutely wonderful job. He's kind of a scary person because he envisions a lot of different things. But look, he's put people in space. He's got technologies that are continuing to be developed. You start to realize that the information, had you known it, early on, you could have capitalized on it. Take, for instance, Bitcoin. Who would think that Bitcoin would be? I think today it's almost $11,000 US. Back in the day when I saw Bitcoin, I thought, oh, this is interesting, and it was $200. And yet it was like, okay, well, how do I get this stuff? Because obviously it's not something you put in your pocket. So the confusion over it led to, my not acting on it. But the realization is that Bitcoin, for many people, has become a wonderful investment by virtue of the fact that they did, they got knowledge. They were able to get a knowledge base where they could actually invest and understand. It is not, and I will tell you, having looked at it, it is not the easiest thing to try to explain how you go mine Bitcoins to people. And again, there you look at most people, I think, look at that and say, I really don't think I want to take the risk to do this. And especially now, would you invest in Bitcoin at $10,000? Because I have a friend who said that he did some spreadsheets calculating. He said Bitcoin should be worth like $300,000. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So we got to look at that, and I thought, but at $200, it was okay. I could take that risk. If I lose 200, so what? At 10,000, now I've got to scratch my head a little bit and say, is that a risk I want to take? And how do I capitalize? So I probably will miss out on Bitcoin going to 300,000. But I'll have my peace of mind, which is much more worth much more.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yes. No, please.
No.
You will be a panelist in the conference.
Yes, I'm going to be on a panel that's going to talk about risk and uncertainty. And after meeting with my co-panelists the other day via Zoom conference call, it is going to be really interesting because the other two panelists that I'm sharing the panel with are bringing risk perspectives from very divergent viewpoints. So one will look at the issue of human capital and talk about bias, and then talk about how those relate. And then obviously I'll look at kind of broader risk in terms of operational. And then another colleague is going to bring a different perspective on risk. So bringing those perspectives together, one, it should be really challenging in a lot of respects, but two, the conversation should be really interesting. And based on our conversation the other day, I think we really there was no fear in communicating what they felt. So I was really happy to see that.
Well, when people from working on uncertainty gathers, there is no fear. I'm sure about that.
Yep. It was interesting though, because then you even in a short conversation like that, I begin to start to realize that there are bits and pieces that relate to things that I'm looking at, and that I'm learning a different viewpoint on that perspective, and can say, oh, okay, if I'm in this situation, I can now apply that knowledge this way and think about it in a different way. So it really is. I'm really excited about the panels and just the day for the Catalyzing the Future. That should be a really interesting day for people.
And let's invite everybody who watching us in this video to connect on catalyzingthefuture.com and register. And this way they will get the links to the other panels. It's a free conference. We just need to log in with your credential to have access to everything. Thank you for a very, very pleasant conversation, Gary, today. And looking forward to see you in a panel with your new friends.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Ciprian. Have a good evening. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
All right.